The silence inside the Sky Tribunal was not empty. It was curated. Elias Vorn felt it pressing against his skin the moment he was escorted onto the obsidian platform. The air shimmered faintly, threaded with invisible surveillance fields that hummed at frequencies just below conscious perception. Every breath, every micro-expression, every deviation in heart rhythm was being recorded, analyzed, and quietly judged. Across from him, arranged in a perfect semicircle beneath the vaulted crystal dome, stood the Chosen. 6 alien women, each a vision of deliberate beauty. They were tall, elegant, their skin luminous with soft bioluminescent patterns that shifted subtly with emotion. Long silver and indigo hair flowed as if guided by a private gravity. Their eyes, gold, violet, cerulean, reflected the light of the floating data sigils orbiting above them. They wore ceremonial gowns grown from living fabric, each tailored to emphasize symmetry, fertility markers, and aesthetic ideals refined over centuries. They were flawless, and they knew it. High above them, seated upon a levitating dais of star-forged crystal, Empress Valith Sarastra observed in silence. Her presence alone bent the atmosphere, an ancient pressure that spoke of conquest, restraint, and absolute authority. Beside her hovered the council oracles, translucent beings of light and probability, their forms constantly recalculating outcomes. The trial had ended 3 cycles ago. Elias had survived. Not through brute force, not through aggression, but through restraint, through choosing when not to act, through refusing to strike when violence would have earned applause, through defying the unspoken expectation that humans were only valuable when they were dangerous. That apparently had made him interesting. "You may choose," the Empress said at last, her voice smooth and cold as polished stone. "One companion, one bond, the one who will stand beside you during your integration into our dominion." A ripple of anticipation moved through the chamber. The nobles leaned forward, the oracles brightened. The chosen women lifted their chins almost imperceptibly. Elias exhaled slowly. He looked at them one by one. They were breathtaking. Any of them could have been sculpted into myth back on Earth. Any of them would have shattered human history with a single appearance. And yet, his gaze drifted unbidden to the far edge of the platform. She stood apart, not hidden, not restrained. Just separate, her skin did not glow. It held a natural tone, warm, matte, unenhanced. Her hair was dark, worn loose without ornament. Her features were undeniably beautiful but not engineered, not optimized, not screaming for attention. She wore no ceremonial gown. Instead, she wore a simple robe of deep blue, unadorned, its fabric unresponsive to the emotional light fields dancing around the others. While her sisters stood poised like prizes, she stood like a person. She met his eyes and did not look away. A faint murmur passed through the chamber. The Empress's gaze sharpened. "That one," Elias said calmly, lifting his hand. "I choose her." The silence that followed was not curated. It was shocked. The oracles stuttered, their probability matrices flickering violently. Data sigils flared crimson, then collapsed into incoherent spirals. Somewhere in the upper galleries, someone laughed briefly, nervously, before being silenced. The chosen women turned, disbelief etched into their perfect expressions. The unadorned woman did not move. The Empress rose slowly from her dais. "You are certain," Valith said, her voice now edged with something dangerous. "You decline genetic harmony. You decline optimized bonding. You decline perfection." Elias nodded once. "I decline what's rehearsed." A sharp intake of breath echoed through the hall. The woman finally spoke. "You should understand," she said, her voice steady, resonant in a way that bypassed the acoustics of the chamber and settled directly behind his eyes. "I am restricted." Elias felt it then, a pressure not invasive but present, like standing near a deep current beneath still water. "Restricted how?" he asked. Her lips curved, not in seduction but in something closer to quiet amusement. "They fear what I perceive," she said, "and what might perceive you back." The Empress descended from her dais in a slow, deliberate glide, her form now towering before them. "This one," Valeth said coldly, "was not meant to be chosen." "Then maybe," Elias replied, meeting the Empress's gaze without flinching. "She was meant to be found." For the first time in 300 years of rule, the corridor beyond the Sky Tribunal was not meant for ceremony. It was narrow by imperial standards, its walls composed of layered obsidian crystal that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. As Elias walked beside her, he became acutely aware of the subtle shift in atmosphere. The hum of surveillance fields thinning, the weight of observation easing just slightly. Not gone, never gone, but less performative. She noticed it too. "You feel it," she said quietly, not looking at him. "I was hoping I was just imagining things." "No," she replied. "The palace listens less carefully down here. These passages were built before the oracles learned to predict disobedience." That earned a faint smile from him. They moved in silence for several steps, the echo of their footfalls softened by the adaptive flooring. Elias stole glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Up close, the differences were even more apparent. Her beauty wasn't diminished compared to the others. It was unfiltered. No bioluminescent cues, no pheromonal manipulation, no micro-adjustments to posture or expression designed to elicit attraction. And yet his pulse hadn't slowed since he'd chosen her. "Do you have a name?" he asked at last. "Or am I supposed to keep calling you, the one everyone pretends doesn't exist?" She huffed softly. "I exist quite loudly in the wrong places." Then she turned her head, meeting his gaze fully. "My name is Saris." The way she said it carried weight, not status, identity. "Elias," he replied, "former systems engineer. Current political mistake." Her lips curved again, sharper this time. "You chose me in front of the Empress. That makes you a structural anomaly. Always wanted to be special." They reached a threshold where the corridor widened abruptly, opening into a private transit chamber. A single levitation platform hovered at its center, dormant but humming with restrained energy. No attendants waited. No guard stood watch. That more than anything unsettled him. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Residential Sector Theta," Sarah said. "Restricted, shielded, politically inconvenient." "Sounds cozy." She stepped onto the platform. After a moment's hesitation, he followed. The platform rose without warning, accelerating upward through layers of the palace Elias hadn't seen before, spaces between spaces. Structural arteries. Data veins pulsing with information he couldn't read but somehow felt brushing against his thoughts like distant fingertips. He stiffened. Saris noticed instantly. "You're sensitive," she murmured. "More than baseline human norms." "I've been told I'm observant." "That's not what this is." The pressure increased briefly, then receded as the platform passed through a shimmering barrier. Elias sucked in a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "What was that?" he asked. "Psychic filtration," she said. "The palace scans for resonance spikes. Yours almost triggered a flag." Almost, that word lodged uncomfortably in his chest. They arrived in silence. The platform settled into a chamber that felt nothing like the opulence above. The space was vast but subdued. Dark stone, soft ambient light, wide windows opening onto the endless sprawl of the capital city below. Floating transit lanes traced luminous arcs through the air like constellations in motion. "This is restrained," Elias said. Saris nodded. "This wing was designed for minds that destabilize prediction models." "Let me guess. You've spent a lot of time here." "Most of my life." The door sealed behind them with a quiet finality. Elias turned slowly, taking in the space, and then the subtle shift in the air. Something was happening, not externally, inside him. His thoughts felt closer together, sharper, as if background noise he'd never known existed had suddenly been muted. He rolled his shoulders uneasy. Saris was watching him carefully now. "You feel it more strongly once the palace dampeners are gone," she said. "The bond field activates automatically." "Bond field," he repeated. "You make that sound very casual." It isn't, she replied, which is why this is problematic. Before he could ask, the air between them shimmered. Holographic sigils ignited around the chamber, translucent, angular, spinning slowly as data streamed across them. Elias recognized biometric markers instantly: heart rate, neural activity, hormonal flux, compatibility metrics. Well, he muttered, there goes my privacy. Saris frowned, not at the displays but at one in particular. That's not expected. What is? She gestured and one of the sigils expanded between them. Elias' neural readout glowed a steady blue. Hers pulsed violet. Where the two fields overlapped, something new formed, an interference pattern that flared bright white. Resonance, and it was climbing. This fast, Elias asked, is that bad? Saris didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer. The moment she did, the resonance spiked. Elias' breath caught not from fear, but from a sudden flood of sensation that wasn't entirely his own. Curiosity, focus, a sharp, disciplined calm layered over a quiet, long-held loneliness. He looked at her, startled. You're feeling you, she finished softly, and you're feeling me. The displays surged again. Saris swore under her breath in a language that sounded older than the Empire itself. This shouldn't be possible, she said. Not without enhancement. Not without preparation. Maybe I'm just talented. She met his gaze, eyes narrowing with something like suspicion. No, she said. This feels familiar. Alarms did not blare. Sirens did not scream. Instead, far below them, deep within the palace's predictive core, probability and the palace did not like uncertainty. Elias felt it before he understood it, an almost imperceptible tightening in the air, like a breath held too long. The ambient light in the chamber shifted by a fraction, recalibrating. Somewhere far beneath them, systems were adjusting, compensating, attempting to explain what had no precedent. Saris turned her head slightly, listening to something he couldn't hear. They're noticing, she said. Who is they? Elias asked. Because I'm getting the feeling that answer keeps getting bigger. The oracles, the predictive cores, the parts of this empire that believe reality should behave. And we're not behaving. No, she agreed, we're interfering. The resonance between them continued to rise, not explosively, not violently, but steadily, like a tide that didn't recognize shorelines. Elias could feel impressions now, not thoughts exactly, but edges of them. Emotional contours, the shape of restraint Saris had worn for years, the discipline, the constant awareness of being monitored not for what she did, but for what she might become. It made something in his chest tighten. You've been alone in this place, he said before he could stop himself. Saris froze. Slowly she turned to face him. I did not tell you that, she said. No, Elias replied quietly. You didn't. The displays around them flickered again. Compatibility indices climbed past thresholds marked in warning amber, then into values that had no corresponding labels. The system, clearly, had not been designed for this. Saris exhaled, controlled but strained. This is accelerating too quickly, she said. If the Empress sees these readings, she already knows something's wrong, Elias said. You don't build an empire like this without noticing when the math breaks. As if summoned by his words, the air in front of them rippled. Light folded inward, resolving into the tall, imposing form of Empress Valith Sarastra. Even as a projection, her presence dominated the chamber, her eyes immediately drawn not to them, but to the data. The resonance spike flared. Valith's expression hardened. So, the Empress said, her voice calm and lethal, this is where probability goes to die. Saris inclined her head. My Empress. Elias did not bow. He wasn't sure why. It simply didn't occur to him. Valith noticed. Her gaze shifted to him, fully now, ancient and piercing. You were not chosen for power, she said. You were chosen for restraint. And yet here you are, destabilizing systems older than your species, written history. Funny, Elias replied. From where I'm standing, your systems look like they destabilize themselves just fine. A murmur rippled through unseen channels. The oracles whispering, Valith raised a hand, silencing them. You feel it too, don't you? She said, not accusing, assessing. The resonance, the anomaly. Sarah straightened. It is mutual. That is the problem, Valith replied. It should not be. Her gaze sharpened, turning clinical. You refused enhancement. You refused optimization. And yet your neural field is acting as an amplifier. Saris met her eyes without flinching. I refused control. Silence. Heavy, dangerous. Then Valith's attention returned to Elia's. And you, the Empress said softly. You resonate as if your mind was designed to interface with psychic architectures. Elias felt the familiar itch at the base of his skull. Old memories, white rooms, monitors, voices talking about potential and limits. I don't know what you think you see, he said carefully, but I'm just human. Valith smiled. No, she said. You are what happens when humans survive their own ambition. With a gesture, she expanded one of the holographic readouts. Elia's neural patterns unfolded in 3 dimensions, layered with data Saris had never seen before. Her breath caught. These markers, she said slowly, they're not Calathian. No, Valith agreed. They are human, experimental, integrated at a level your species does not yet publicly admit to possessing. Elias clenched his jaw. So much for keeping that buried. The gladiatorial trials damaged several of those systems, the Empress continued. Our healers repaired them. In doing so, they harmonized what was never meant to be harmonized. Saris turned to him, eyes searching his face. You didn't tell me, she said, not accusing but hurt. I didn't know, he replied honestly. I ran from that life. I thought it was gone. Valith watched the exchange with something like interest. And yet, she said, when paired with a psychic anomaly who was never meant to bond, the result is this. The resonance surged again, brighter than before. Warning sigils bloomed red. For the first time, the Empress's composure cracked. This cannot continue unchecked, she said. If the resonance reaches critical coherence, it will rewrite predictive lattices across the capital, across the empire. Elias swallowed. Rewrite how? Saris answered, voice barely above a whisper. By creating futures they cannot see. Silence followed that, the kind that changed history. Valith studied them both, ancient calculations warring behind her eyes. Finally, she spoke. There are 2 paths forward, she said. One, we sever the bond permanently. Saris stiffened. Elias felt something in his mind. The chamber darkened. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but with the deliberate precision of a system reallocating resources. Containment protocols disengaged one by one. Elias felt it like a pressure drop inside his skull, a sudden expansion of awareness that made the room feel smaller than it had a moment ago. Sounds sharpened. Distance lost meaning. He could hear the faint hum of transit lanes far outside the tower, feel the rhythm of the city pulsing beneath the stone like a living thing. Saris staggered. He caught her without thinking. The instant his hands closed around her arms, the resonance locked. Not spiked. Locked. The holographic displays froze, then rewrote themselves in cascading streams of unfamiliar symbols. Compatibility values vanished, replaced by architecture diagrams, neural overlays, psychic harmonics, feedback loops forming and stabilizing in real time. Saris gasped, fingers digging into his sleeves. This is, her breath hitched. This is full coherence. Valith did not move. The Empress stood utterly still, watching the data rewrite itself around them with an expression Elias couldn't read. Not fear, not triumph, recalibration. You were warned, Valith said quietly, though the words were not aimed at them. This empire was not built to accommodate unknown variables. Sarah straightened slowly, steadying herself against Elias. When she spoke, her voice carried a depth it hadn't before, layered, resonant, as if it echoed from somewhere behind the present moment. You don't get to choose what survives evolution, she said. Only whether you adapt or break. The air rippled, not with energy, with attention. Elias felt it then, countless minds brushing against the edge of their shared awareness. Not invading, observing, the oracles. the city's psychic infrastructure. Ancient systems designed to interpret reality suddenly forced to experience it instead. His heart hammered. "Saris," he murmured, "I'm seeing things." She nodded once. "So am I." Images flickered through his mind, probability branches collapsing and reforming, futures that had once been fixed now splitting into thousands of unstable possibilities. At the center of all of them, a constant, them, not rulers, not conquerors, anchors. Valith exhaled slowly. "This is unacceptable," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You are generating autonomous probability zones. The Empire cannot predict within your radius." "Good," Elias said, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. "Neither could the people who built me." The Empress's gaze snapped to him. "You were engineered," she said. "Refined, you are not free of design." "No," Elias agreed. "But I am free of ownership." The words resonated literally. Saris's hand tightened around his. "Yes," she said softly, "you are." The chamber shook, not violently, not destructively, reverently. Somewhere deep in the palace, an oracle screamed as its projection matrices collapsed into static. Others dimmed, their luminous forms destabilizing as predictive certainty drained from their calculations. Valith took a step back. "Just one, it was enough." "This bond," the Empress said more cautiously now, "is no longer ceremonial. It is strategic, existential." She lifted her chin, pride and pragmatism warring behind her eyes. "You will be contained," she continued, "studied, integrated into imperial structure." Saris laughed. It was not cruel, it was tired. "No," she said, "we won't." Valith's eyes flashed. "You presume." "I presume nothing," Saris replied calmly. "I see." She closed her eyes. Elias felt it before he understood it. Saris opening herself fully, not outward but through him. Their minds aligned, not merging but interlocking, each reinforcing the other's boundaries. The pressure vanished. In its place, clarity. The chamber fell silent. Valith's hologram flickered violently, struggling to maintain coherence within the probability distortion field they were now generating effortlessly. "What are you?" the Empress demanded. Elias met her gaze. "Not a weapon," he said, "not a ruler." Saris opened her eyes, luminous now with something far deeper than enhancement. "We are an outcome," she said, "of everything you try to control, choosing differently." The palace's systems made a sound Elias had never heard before. Recalculation. Valith studied them for a long, unreadable moment. Then slowly, she smiled. "A new variable," the Empress said. "Very well." Her image stabilized, though its edges remained distorted. "You will not be contained," she continued. "You will not be studied." Saris narrowed her eyes. "Then what?" Valith's smile sharpened. "You will be deployed." Far below, the capital city shifted. Transit lanes rerouting. Security grid deployment did not come with applause. There was no ceremony, no gathered nobility, no carefully staged approval from the oracles. What remained of them? Instead, Elias and Saris stood alone in a chamber that existed outside the palace's normal geometry, a place where walls curved in ways that confused depth perception, and the floor hummed with dormant power. A threshold space, preparation not celebration. The city beyond the transparent arc of the chamber looked different now. Not changed, but revealed. Elias could feel the flow of it, the emotional undercurrents threading through billions of minds. Fear, ambition, loyalty, suppression. Hope buried deep but stubbornly alive. Sarah stood beside him, hands clasped behind her back, posture composed. But he could feel the tension in her through the bond, not fear, not doubt, but anticipation sharpened to a fine edge. "This is where they decide how much of us they're willing to risk," Elias said. Saris inclined her head. "And how much of themselves?" A presence manifested behind them, not projected this time. Physical. Empress Valith stepped into the chamber without escort, her form solid, her footsteps real. Up close, Elias felt the full weight of her, centuries of command, restraint forged by necessity, not cruelty. "You understand what deployment means," Valeth said, her voice even. You will be placed where prediction fails, where instability threatens imperial continuity. Sounds like a compliment, Elias replied. It is not, Valeth said. Then after a beat, entirely. She gestured and the chamber responded. A holographic map unfolded around them, star systems blooming into view, some stable, others fractured by red warning sigils. Border regions, Sarah said softly. Causal fracture zones. Yes, Valeth replied. Places where probability no longer collapses cleanly, where rebellion, divergence, and inconvenient truths accumulate. Elias studied the map. You're sending us to problems you can't solve. Valeth met his gaze. I am sending you to problems I cannot predict. Saris turned to the Empress fully now. And what happens if we decide not to comply? The silence that followed was measured. Then Valeth answered honestly. Then the Empire will adapt without you, she said. Clumsily, violently, with casualties I would prefer to avoid. Elias felt Saris weigh that not as a moral trap but as data. Fine, he said. We'll go. Saris glanced at him. He shrugged. If we're going to break things, we might as well break the right ones. Something like approval flickered across Valeth's expression. Your first assignment, the Empress said, and the map zoomed inward, isolating a distant system rimmed in unstable light. A human-aligned frontier world, recently absorbed. Its population is resisting integration. Elias stiffened. Human, he repeated, as in Earth origin. Yes. Saris watched him carefully. This matters to you. It does, he said, because I know what happens when empires call resistance instability. Valeth did not deny it. That world is already beyond our predictive reach, she said. Your presence will either stabilize it or accelerate its separation. And you're willing to gamble on that? Elias asked. Valeth's smile was thin. The universe has already placed the wager. The chamber began to shift, panels sliding apart to reveal a transit aperture humming with coiled energy. The air vibrated with imminent movement. Sarah stepped closer to Elias. You don't have to do this, she said quietly, not urging, not pleading, offering truth. He met her eyes. I do, he replied, but not alone. The bond warmed, not flaring, not overwhelming, just present, steady, chosen. Valeth observed them in silence, then spoke one final time. Understand this, she said. Once you cross that threshold, you are no longer an anomaly. The aperture brightened. You are precedent. Elias took Saris's hand. Together, the transition did not feel like movement. There was no sensation of speed, no tearing of space, no dramatic lurch. Instead, Elias experienced a moment of absence, a brief, impossible gap where location, identity, and time loosened their grip. Then reality returned. The sky above them burned, not with fire but with atmosphere tearing itself apart as orbital defenses traded energy bursts with unseen ships beyond the clouds. Sirens wailed across the city below, a human city, angular buildings, familiar materials, improvised shields hastily retrofitted with alien technology. Resistance. They stood on a high platform overlooking it all, the transit aperture sealing behind them with a sound like a final decision being made. Saris inhaled sharply. So many voices, she murmured. Untrained, afraid, angry. Elias felt it too, not as sound but as pressure. Millions of human minds pushed to their limits, caught between submission and annihilation. He recognized the pattern immediately. Occupation under the word integration. They're going to make an example of this world, he said. Win here and the others won't try. Saris turned to him. And if they lose? They won't, Elias said quietly. Not unless something changes the equation. The bond between them responded, not surging, not flaring, but aligning. The resonance settled into a stable, deliberate rhythm, no longer reactive but intentional. For the first time, Elias understood what they were becoming. Not a weapon, a variable. Saris, he said, can you reach them, the people down there? She closed her eyes. The world seemed to lean toward her. Yes, she replied, but not the way you're thinking. I can't command them. I can't overwrite fear. That's fine, Elias said. I don't want control. He stepped forward to the edge of the platform and looked out over the city. Anti-orbital cannons fired from rooftops. Small, desperate ships streaked upward, doomed but defiant. Then what? Saris asked. Elias took a breath. I want connection. Understanding dawned in her expression. Together, they opened the bond outward, not forcing, not invading, but offering. A resonance tuned not to obedience but to recognition. The effect was immediate. Across the city, people paused. Pilots hesitated mid-ascent. Soldiers faltered behind barricades, not because they were compelled, but because something answered. Hope, not loud, not naive, shared. Human minds touched something steady in the chaos, a certainty that they were not alone, that someone saw them not as assets or variables, but as people whose choices still mattered. In orbit, Calathian command algorithms began to fail. Targeting solutions returned incomplete. Engagement probabilities refused to collapse. Every outcome branched. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, officers stared at their displays in rising panic. This is impossible, one whispered. They're synchronizing. Valith Sarastra watched from a distant observation chamber, her expression unreadable as reports flooded in. They are not rebelling, she said slowly. They are aligning. On the platform, Saris opened her eyes, breath unsteady. This is dangerous, she said, if they feel us too strongly. They won't, Elias replied. We're not leading them. We're standing with them. The sky shifted. Imperial ships powered down, not all, not in surrender, but in hesitation. The first crack in inevitability. Below, a cheer rose, not unified, not triumphant, but real. Saris looked at Elias, wonder softening her composure. You changed the battlefield, she said, without firing a single shot. He smiled faintly. Turns out humans are contagious. The bond between them stabilized completely. No alarms, no warnings, no thresholds breached, just coherence. Far away, deep within the Imperial core, the oracles, what remained of them, updated their final assessment. Outcome classification, irreversible.